إلى عدم التشبث بمعادلات خشبية جامدة.
الأفق ليس مسدودا.
Good afternoon and thank you for joining us on FutureTV. I'm Linda Tamim and these are today's top stories. A group of nuns held by rebels in Syria for more than 3 months have been released following Lebanese-Qatari mediation. Students hold a series of sit-ins across several universities in Lebanon, calling on March 14 to denounce Hezbollah's recent statements against President Michel Sleiman. And Russia steps towards diplomacy as a move to overcome the crisis in Ukraine, but stands firm on the fate of Crimea. A group of nuns held by rebels in Syria for more than 3 months have been released following Lebanese-Qatari mediation and are on their way to Damascus via Lebanon. A Lebanese security source says the nuns had been taken to the Lebanese town of Al-Sal earlier in the week, and they were headed to Syria, accompanied by the head of the Lebanese security agency and Qatari intelligence official. The British-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights says the release was part of a swap in which the government would free about 150 women prisoners. The 13 nuns and 3 maids were kidnapped from the Christian town of Ma'loula, north of Damascus, in December and taken to the nearby Syrian rebel-held town of Yabrud, where they were believed to have been held by Al-Qaeda affiliate Jabhat al-Nusra. Former Prime Minister Saad Hariri welcomes the release of Ma'loula's nuns, saying all kidnap and detention operations contradict with the simplest principles of human rights. For his part, President Michel Sleiman thanks Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani for Doha's role in the release of the nuns. A Babda Palace statement says Sleiman also thanked the Syrian government and other parties involved in the release of the nuns. The presidential statement says Sleiman rejects kidnappings under any excuse and stresses during meetings with Army Chief General Jean Ahwaji the importance of following up on the cases of 2 bishops and a journalist kidnapped in Syria. On the recent abductions carried out in Lebanon, Sleiman says it is important for security and military agencies to coordinate the arrest of the gangs involved in kidnappings. Progressive Socialist Party leader MP Walid Jumblat also praises the release of the Ma'loula nuns, hoping that security agencies will put an end to abductions in Lebanon. He adds that all security agencies should be on alert to end the phenomenon of kidnappings in the country. He remarked they should arrest the kidnapping gangs that are growing in numbers given the lack of security measures in various regions. Moreover, the MP says that abductions hamper freedom in Lebanon and tarnish the state's credibility. Numerous instances have proven that state can achieve several political, economic and security accomplishments if it takes a decisive stand to do so, he noted. Jumblat wondered why so few prisoners in Syrian jails were released in exchange for the nuns, knowing that thousands of political prisoners are being detained in Syria. Students have held a series of sit-ins across several universities in Lebanon, calling on March 14 to denounce Hezbollah's recent statements against President Michel Sleiman. Last week, Hezbollah took an unprecedented swipe at Sleiman, saying the Lebanese leader required specialized care. A day after the head of state implicitly slammed the party's army, people resistance formula as hindering the release of the cabinet's policy statement. Future parliamentary bloc MP Fuad Sanyura stresses that political rift in Lebanon is the main cause of the poor economic growth and deflation. He expresses hope that Lebanon will overcome its tough economic situation, saying the country is passing through a delicate and hard stage due to the surrounding political developments. Sanyura states that as long as Hezbollah insists on engaging in battles in Syria, it is unlikely to achieve acceptable growth rate. The World Bank estimates Lebanon will need $2.6 billion over 3 years just to handle the refugee situation. Last week, an international support group for Lebanon has called on nations to extend pledges of financial help for the country, which is coping with an influx of Syrian refugees, terror attacks, and a struggling economy. Syria's civil conflict has left the country's health system so severely crippled that some patients are opting to be knocked out with metal bars for lack of anesthesia. This is according to a news report by the Save the Children charity. The report, A Devastating Toll, looks at the impact of 3 years of war on the health of the country's children. The charity says more than 10,000 young lives had been lost as a direct result of the violence. Syrian officials were not immediately available to comment. Children's lives in Syria are on the line before they are even born, the report says, with about 4.3 million children in need of humanitarian assistance.
What we've seen with the report is basically there's been a complete collapse of much of the health system inside Syria. We're seeing situations, for example, in Aleppo, where 36 doctors are looking after around 2.5 million patients across the city. So a system that's collapsed, 60% of health facilities have been damaged or destroyed. And as a result of that, we're seeing some really terrible outcomes for children. We work inside Syria in various locations. So far we've reached more than 500,000 children. We're helping mothers give birth to children safely. We're helping rehabilitate health services. We're helping with immunisation programs to try to tackle, for example, polio. But unfortunately for us, it's the lack of access, the lack of unfettered access across the country, which is basically preventing us from doing a lot more.
Amnesty International says the Syrian government's siege of the Yarmouk Palestinian refugee camp is a crime against humanity and should see the regime referred to the International Criminal Court. Since July of 2013, when the government prevented the entry of aid into the area, Yarmouk's remaining residents, thought to number around 20,000, have been exposed to untold hardship and serious risks. For months, residents survive by eating anything that might be edible, and a common meal can consist of water mixed with spices. As for healthcare, medical facilities have been badly hit, and medical personnel have left fearing arrest. The main hospital that continues to function, the Palestine Hospital, has only 2 remaining doctors. The government's treatment of Yarmouk constitutes both a war crime and a crime against humanity, and recommends that Syria be referred to the ICC. And coming up next, the vanished Malaysia Airlines plane remains an aviation mystery. That and more after the break. Welcome back. Israeli troops have shot dead a Palestinian who allegedly tried to snatch a soldier's weapon at the Al-Anbai bridge crossing between the West Bank and Jordan. Israeli officials initially said the Palestinian was wounded, but the army confirmed he had died of his injuries shortly afterwards. Palestinian security officials identified the victim as 38-year-old Ra'ed Zaited from the northern West Bank city of Nablus. They added that he had left the West Bank in 2011 and had not returned since, but did not know where he had been living. Ofer Leffler, spokesman for the Israel Airports Authority, which is responsible for all the border crossings, said the frontier had been closed in the wake of the attack. Russia has made what may be a move towards taking part in talks over the Ukrainian crisis, but is standing firm in its insistence that Crimea has a right to break away from Kiev's rule. Britain states that Russian President Vladimir Putin had promised to meet his foreign minister to discuss creating an international contact group. The small diplomatic step forward came against the backdrop of Putin's recognition on Sunday of Crimea's self-declared leaders as the breakaway peninsula's legitimate authorities. The promise of talks comes on the back of statements made by German Chancellor Angela Merkel, who insists a contact group be formed to deal with questions of territorial integrity, minorities, and the preparations for elections. In Asia, search and rescue teams state that they are no closer to finding the missing Malaysia Airlines plane, which vanished somewhere between Malaysia and Vietnam despite a huge international search effort. The disappearance of a Malaysia jetliner is an unprecedented aviation mystery, officials say, with a massive air and sea search now in its 3rd day failing to find any confirmed trace of the plane or the 239 people aboard. Malaysia Civil Aviation Authority says a hijacking attempt could not be ruled out as investigators explore all theories for the loss of Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 en route to Beijing. Questions mounted over possible security lapses and whether a bomb or hijacking attempt could have brought down the Boeing airliner. Interpol says a check of all documents used to board the plane had revealed more suspect passports, which are being investigated. And now for news around the world in brief, the Taliban warns Afghans not to participate in next month's presidential polls and to stay away from voting booths, saying it will use all force to disrupt the vote. The group's statement comes 26 days ahead of the nation's 3rd presidential and provincial council polls. The Taliban vowed to target all workers, activists, callers, security apparatus and offices. It urges nations to hinder any process that would allow any public places to be used as polling centers. North Korea's leader Kim Jong-un has won every ballot cast by voters in his district, where he ran uncontested during the first elections to the Supreme People's Assembly legislature under his rule. Kim's district, which is located on the symbolic Mount Paektu, recorded 100% turnout during Sunday's elections without a single dissenting ballot. Mexico's government says it has confirmed that a man killed in an early morning shootout with Marines in the west of the country was the leader of the Knights Templar cartel, whom officials reported slain in 2010. Reports say the identity of Nazario Moreno Gonzalez has been confirmed by fingerprints, but added that further tests will take place. The UN Security Council has launched an investigation into human rights abuses in the Central African Republic. The chair of the investigation, Bernard Achour-Mouna, former Mexican Secretary of Foreign Affairs Jorge Castaneda, and Mauritanian human rights lawyer Fatima Tambay are due to arrive at the capital of Bangui today. Mouna states that the mandate of the year-long investigation of rights abuses since the start of 2013 is to stop any advances towards genocide.
Just outside Bangui, the capital of the Central African Republic, a group of young Christians carry out a revenge attack on a Muslim village. It follows what they claim were earlier deadly assaults on them. Sectarian fighting in the former French colony has spiralled out of control.
Ils ont massacré les populations et tout le monde sont en bourse. C'est pas pour que les villageois sont en colère. C'est pourquoi qu'on a fait ça.
The country descended into intercommunal conflict after Muslim rebels seized power last March. But over the past month, the western region of the country has seen a dramatic increase in sectarian violence. Christian militias, known as anti-Balaka, have turned on the minority population following the resignation of the interim Muslim president. In a mass exodus, tens of thousands of Muslims are now being forced out of their country, some to neighbouring Chad and Cameroon.
C'est eux qui viennent dire qu'ils ne voulons pas les musulmans ici, ils vont venir tuer, les musulmans sont partis, leur demander le pardon, on a donné le bœuf, on a donné de l'argent. Ils ne voulaient pas, ils disent qu'ils vont tuer seulement les gens de Baour.
Many can't leave and are seeking refuge in local churches. Whole neighbourhoods have been left deserted, areas where just weeks ago Muslims lived. Their houses looted, their mosques abandoned. Those who take to the road are frequently ambushed by the Christian militiamen from whom they are fleeing.
Ils ont des anti-Balaka, demandent avec leurs chauffeurs de faire descendre les musulmans. Oui. C'est comme ça que les massacres de musulmans sont ici.
Hundreds have been killed since December. No one is spared.
Les anti-Balaka nous ont arrêtés. Ils ont pris ma mère, ma grande-sœur et ma soeur. Ils ont fouillé le village. Quand ils l'ont pris, ils l'ont déshabillé tout. Ils l'ont pris de l'argent. Et ils ont pris les petites monteurs. Ils l'ont tiré. Ils l'ont partagé en deux.
Around 2,000 Muslims are currently waiting in a hangar at Bangui Airport, hoping to be flown out.
On est là comme ça. On est né ici, grandi ici, vieillir ici. Subitement, les gens commençaient à taper tout le monde. Si tu es musulman, on te tape, pas que rester ici. C'est pas votre pays, il faut partir. Bon. C'est pour cela, sauf là, on peut rester tranquille. Nous, on n'a pas de pays.
Although there are almost 7,000 international peacekeepers in the country, from France and the African Union, they have no presence in many areas where violence is rife. Amnesty International is calling on the international community to urge full deployment to prevent further ethnic cleansing.
This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our headlines. A group of nuns held by rebels in Syria for more than 3 months have been released following Lebanese-Qatari mediation. Students hold a series of sit-ins across several universities in Lebanon, calling on March 14 to denounce Hezbollah's recent statements against President Michel Sleiman. And Russia steps towards diplomacy as a move to overcome the crisis in Ukraine, but stands firm on the fate of Crimea. That's it for me and the news team here at Future Television. I'm Lynette Tamim, wishing you all a very nice evening.
إلى عدم التشبث بمعادلات خشبية جامدة.
الأفق ليس مسدودا.